I've been a hairstylist, a caterer, a textile consultant. I've been a writer and an advertising professional. I've set up an e-commerce firm, and today I work in the development sector. I've volunteered for years at the AIMS Cancer Wards. I've taught children English. I've even coached basketball. Apart from proving that I have the attention span of a small-size avocado, this professional agility has actually forced me to rejig my talents and skills 1 million ways and then some. Some of them have worked out for me, and the others, well, they worked out for me as well, except not in the ways that I could have imagined. But because I've had the opportunity and the necessity to reinvent myself so many times, I can look back and share with you what I've learned about rewiring my own life for creativity and innovation. And the first rule that I have gleaned from my life is very simple. It is, broken is just a data point. Honestly, when does one have to reset and start again? When it's a bust. When simply changing the light bulb and the switch is not going to hack it anymore. That's when you've got to rewire. You know, the word rewire itself is pretty wild. Its definition spans the most mundane and banal of human chores to the most glorious possibilities of human potential. And you know what's even wilder is that this most glorious possibilities of human potential definition, the seeds of this are actually contained in the banal, let's change the wires meaning. A long time ago, I was chased by a cricket bat waving, shrieking girl whose hair I had cut on our college campus. When a lot of my clients actually joined her, I knew it was a clue that maybe my hairstyling career was coming to an end. There are many times in life that we are faced with data such as this, data that points to the fact that something, our careers, our relationships, our favorite course of study, is broken somehow. And we react naturally with sadness and shame that we are at this point of crisis. And because we've always been taught to avert and avoid crisis, our reaction is to be scared of them. But the word crisis actually is really interesting. Its etymology is, it's derived from a Greek root, krinion, which simply means decision. So a crisis is simply the world's way of letting you know that it's time for a decision. And you know, that in itself is liberating because you get to decide what to do next. Let me give you an example. I work at CRY, Child Rights Anew. It's an NGO that looks after many dispossessed and underprivileged children in tiny hamlets and urban slums across the country. So March 2020, COVID hits, lockdown is announced. While for most of us, it simply means home imprisonment. For the communities and children we work with, the reality is a lot more dire. Most have lost their jobs, or at least will not be paid. Anganwadis and schools are shut, so there are no midday meals for the children. There is no understanding of COVID. There is no possibility of social distancing. This is as full-blown a crisis as a crisis is likely to get. Meanwhile, we at CRY, we're not a relief organization. We don't actually feed children or build schools. We work with communities to enable them to get their rights from the government system for their children. What that means is that we are actually not set up to have systems for purchase, logistics, distribution, supply, etc. All in all, while we know that our communities and children are in dire straits, we ourselves are paralyzed because A, lockdown, and B, because we are novices in what is needed. So what happens? Day 4 or 5 of the lockdown, we hear a rumor that there's another NGO that has a small amount of rations, that they're looking for recipients for. And so we immediately call them up. It's true, they do have those rations, and they very kindly agreed to share them with us for our communities. But next question, where did you get these rations from? And they tell us about some wholesalers who have got permission to keep their godowns open. Next call, to the wholesalers to say, hey, can we come and buy these rations from you as well? And they say, sure, you can, but you need a relief or curfew pass. Next call, the police and the government to say, hey, can we get a relief work curfew pass? And we hear back from them saying, yes, you can. In fact, we'd be happy to provide transport help to you on occasion. But in turn, when you come across some things that we need, please do share them with us, things like sanitary pads. Next call, Johnson & Johnson, hey, do you have pads? And we get a whole bunch for free. And so before you know it, we have this whole system up and running where we are able to access food and essentials from completely, ostensibly shut go-downs. And we have ways and means of getting them to the people most in need. When people, corporates, donors looked around to see who's on the field, from about day 7 of the lockdown, they found that we were running this well-oiled operation as if we'd been doing it for years. So many people wanted to help. There was so much compassion and goodwill that poured through us to those who needed it most. So many corporates who had never partnered with us were happy to partner with us then. And 18 months on are still our partners because they have seen the work that we are doing. And to think that we were in the middle of a huge crisis. And yet, because we did something microscopic, we heard a rumor and we acted upon it. That allowed us to take a decision as to how we would act, react, and respond in this pandemic. And that crisis, that broken down data point, it allowed us the freedom to shape how we will be for the next 18 months, and maybe more. When everything was broken, we got to rebuild it again. And I think we rebuilt it back better than it was before it broke. So the next thing that I have learned in my life about rewiring my life for creativity and innovation is also very simple. Have the courage to fail. I've always been super interested in textiles, and a few years back, I got offered this amazing opportunity to go to, a few key textile traditions in India, and to curate a selection, see the master weavers and craftsmen, and curate a selection of their amazing wares for sale to an international design portal. Now just imagine this. People paid top dollar for these textile tours to have this privilege. And here I was getting this opportunity on a platter. Plus, I was getting paid a fat sum for it. Naturally, I would leap at it, right? Wrong. I said, no way. Why? Because fear? Because shame. I've never studied textiles. I studied economics and business. What do I know about textiles? People study for years. And I was sure to fail. And then when I failed, people would look at me and say, she thinks she knows textiles. That spiral of fear and shame that we all go down. I had to talk myself down from that ledge to explain to myself that imperfection was not failure, that I was using my perfectionism as a shield for my own ego. I finally had to negotiate with myself that no matter the quality of the output that I produced, it would still be an incredible experience. It would still be a privilege. It would still be huge learning. And you know what? Really, nobody would behead me for it. As it happened, I did actually do the project, and I had the most incredible 6 months of my life chasing my passion. And it was all of those things. And best of all, as you can see, my head is still very much attached to my body. I think that we all intellectually understand this, that imperfection does not equal failure, and that nobody is perfect. But I think what we never ever compute is that perfectionism is the enemy of possibilities and creativity. I think that we really never understand that really to do something less than perfect, it does not mean that you have failed. I think having the courage to be imperfect is something that is not true just of individuals, but it's also true of organizations. In fact, it is a living, breathing philosophy at CRY, where I work, and my being here is actually proof of it. My job at CRY is to raise funds and awareness, and when I applied for this job, I had a lot of experience in the awareness, the communications part, but I had never raised a single penny for anything before. I was certain I wouldn't get this gig. And yet, the CEO and the trustees said to me, it's yours if you want it. What's the worst that'll happen? You'll fail. It's okay, we failed before. Just imagine this, an organization that is giving you upfront the permission to fail. And in so doing, it empowers you with the courage to try and to keep trying. In fact, this courage to dream audacious, impossible dreams without fear of ridicule or failure is a foundational DNA at CRY. CRY was actually set up by a 25-year-old man called Ripon Kapoor. He wasn't from a rich family. He didn't have a fancy schmancy job. He was just a purser in an airline. And yet, he had this unshakable conviction that India's children are India's responsibility. And that ordinary people like him and me and you, we cared enough to take action and responsibility for them. So, with the princely sum of rupees 50, he set up CRY to look after the plight of underprivileged children in India. 50 rupees and the dream to transform the lives of 400 million children. That's a man who's not afraid to fail. That 50 rupees has since multiplied several times over. It's been more than 4 decades since. And we have actually raised funds and resources from more than 9 million people. We have worked in 19 states. We have transformed the lives of over 3 million children. And we've been called India's most trusted NGO many times over. You know, all of this sounds grand and it sounds like we are so big and we are too big to fail. But I want to tell you that there have been very many times that we have been clueless and shivering, and we have not known how we will survive one day to the next. And I want to share those stories with you. Way back in the 90s, you know, the sale of greeting cards was really our only source of income. Perhaps one of you or your parents have at one point in time bought a CRY greeting card. Well, on an income tax raid, the storeroom where all these cards are kept is actually sealed. This is a catastrophe. This is our only source of income. It could mean a complete stoppage of operations. And while we're scrabbling around with 10, 12 improbable alternate ways in which we can raise funds, somebody comes to us and proposes a 13th implausible way and says to us, hey, how about if we go on your behalf door to door and tell people what you do and raise funds for you? And we're desperate, and so we're like, yes, yes, let's try this. And in the yes, yes, let's try this, we create a revolution in fundraising. It's a way of raising funds that is used by every single major charity in India today. And it has powered our growth for 20 out of our 42 years. And I want to emphasize this yes, yes, let's try this is not because we are visionaries. It's because we are desperate and therefore willing to evaluate every possibility and every potential. So, you know, things are hunky-dory, we are sort of sitting fine, and we are basically coasting, for the next 2 decades. But you do know, right, the universe doesn't like the concept of coasting. And so, a couple of years back, on another income tax matter, the department then turns around and tells us, actually, it's not in favor of us raising funds, this way anymore. So, boom, there goes this income stream up in smoke. And we have to be clueless and shivering all over again. But there are children down the pike, children whose lives depend on the funds we raise or we don't raise. And so we know we have to do something, anything. So on a wing and a prayer, we cobble together this way of raising funds where we say, hey, instead of going to 100 people door to door and raising 5,000 rupees each, how about if we actually go to find another way to reach 5,000 people and just raise $100? Or better still, how about if we go to 500,000 people and raise just 1 rupee each? And you know what? This is the era of crowdfunding, of mobile digital platforms. So we do try it, and it is successful, and we do recover, not fully, but very substantially. And we do know that this is the growth path for the future, right? So the sky is the limit here. The reason I have shared these stories with you is because I think that they illustrate very clearly the next principle that has worked for me in my life, to rewire it for creativity and innovation, which is cluelessness and panic are your friends. Embrace them. When you are hopeless, when you are desperate, and you don't know what to do, just keep going. If you are moved enough by your end objective, if you are desperate enough, and if you show up every single day, I promise you some small ways and means by which you can achieve the outcome that you are working for, they will begin to show themselves to you, and if they fail, then some more and some more and some more. So when you are hopeless and desperate and don't know what to do, just keep going, please. Slowly is fine. Crawling is fine. No feeling is final, except hope. And this brings me to the last principle of rewiring your thinking. And this really is fundamental because it's about rewiring your idea of success itself. You know, I think one of the most powerful things that we can do for ourselves is actually define success for ourselves, because success has a default definition. It is money, materialism, power. So if you don't define what it means for you, then that's what it means for you too. By that logic, we at CRY have been spectacularly unsuccessful. We have no money, we have terrible salaries, no increments, no bonuses. And yet, there is Naveen, this boy who dropped out of school to help his father sell vegetables. We found him, we re-enrolled him back in school, and this boy notices that when his mother cooks, she is always coughing. And so he potters about and he invents this smokeless chula, which wins him the national award from the Union Ministry of Science and Technology. This child has since received the Sakura Science Fellowship from Japan, and he is today an Ashoka Youth Venturer for tirelessly advocating against child marriage and child labor in his village. This one child is a living example of the limitless potential of every single child on this planet. In 42 years, there have been so many stories, so many children like Naveen, children whose lives have been transformed because they have had the opportunity to explore and realize their own potential. In my life and in my journey with CRY, I too have rewired my definition of success. And for this, because it's so fundamental, I'm just going to go with someone whose English skills are better than mine and say, to know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, that is to have succeeded. Thank you so much for your time and your attention.